A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for keeping it KBC Channel 1. It's time for Biz Check, and my name is Betty Kiptum. Now, about a few days ago, the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, released its report and said that the forex reserves have been not depleted, they have gone below the recommended monthly, the import cover, that is 4 months, and it is down to 3.92 months. In November, that particular import cover was at 3.94 months. Now, we want to just find out how the economy is doing and what this means for the economy. And to have this conversation in studio is David Kingo, who is an economist. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure, and thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Always a pleasure. Let's just start with breaking down those numbers. Why is it, first of all, important to have a 4-month import cover in terms of forex reserves?
Basically, what that one means is that for you to buy, let's use the local language, yes, an example that everyone perhaps can understand. Mm-hmm. When you want to buy something from abroad, you don't buy with Kenya shillings, you buy with USD, or rather an internationally recognized currency is USD for that case. So where do you get this money from? Of course, for me, I have Kenya shillings. I have to walk into a commercial bank and tell them I want to channel my dollars to this particular entity, perhaps in China or perhaps in America. So the bank will use its own dollar in a certain account, exchange with my Kenya shillings, and pay whoever I'm buying from. Mm-hmm. So that particular circle, that particular clearing where this dollar were found by the commercial, that account that perhaps owed these dollars in the commercial banking setup is the one that needs to be cushioned. Mm-hmm. So these particular ratios are given to the CBK to ensure that every commercial bank or whoever is transacting internationally, they have enough currency for anybody who wants to buy to get that particular exchange. So when we walk into a commercial bank and they tell you, perhaps we can only accommodate this number of import in terms of USD, mm-hmm, then it means someone else will come after that and not be able to transact. So that particular question that you're talking about, mm-hmm, do we have enough foreign exchange currencies, forex currencies, in our commercial banks, in our own savings, that can hold transactions for more than 4 months without increasing what we have? Mm-hmm. Yes. So with that background in mind, we are down to 3.92 months of import cover. Yes. Is this a cause for alarm? Definitely, it's a cause for alarm because Kenya is majorly an import country. We don't export. Because once we export, it's the only way that we're able to increase that particular reserve. So the more we keep on importing, we keep on depleting. So we did a reserve, we did a cushion that should be more than even 4 months. Mm-hmm. That in case we don't have any import, or rather in case we don't have any export for the next 4 months, we're still able to buy things from outside. But now what is happening is that particular period, that particular lag period in terms of months vis-a-vis the foreign exchange that is held is going down. So that means that if we don't change anything, if we don't export anything to increase that reserve for the next 4 months, mm-hmm, we will not be able to transact internationally. Mm-hmm. That's what it means. And well, you're talking about the international transactions. So for a Kenyan, how different could life be if we don't work on improving or increasing that particular import cover? So there is this thing that we call cost of living, where mara bei ya vitu imepanda. Mm-hmm. This is the concept. Mm-hmm. What happens if you have a less supply of a commodity in the market, then the demand is increased or the demand is not changing. So what happens? The value of that, the price of that particular commodity increases. This is a scenario that we have 10,000 people who want to buy one phone. So all these customers, or other 5 people want to buy one phone, mm-hmm, and that is the only phone that exists in that particular shop, in that particular area. So what happens is that the seller of that particular phone will increase the price. Mm. So if we keep on demanding this dollar and it is not increasing from the supply side, then the foreign exchange rate will go up. Mm. From perhaps 120 to 140, because people are demanding and it is not there. So the institution that own this particular currency, they will increase its value to take advantage of the high demand. So when we import something at 140 perhaps, and before we used to import at 120, we've imported rice, for example. So what will happen to the price of rice at my local shop in the village? Of course, it will go high. So that particular reserve tells you that we are looking forward into high inflation, we are looking forward into high cost of living. Yes, basically it is that. That is the situation, or yes, the future that as it yes stands. I would like you to paint a picture for us. Countries maybe that have gone to the level that they do not have an import cover. How does this look? We've had such scenarios, and mostly, of course, in Africa. And they end up what we call hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is where the inflation has got to more than double digit. Double digit is above 9,
yes.
10 point something. So that particular situation of hyperinflation, you can only rely on aid. With less supply of goods and services in the economy. And when we have such particular setup, of course, the economy comes down and it's no longer disciplined, and people will consume what they want. If people used to consume quality fuel, of course, then people will start inflating that particular fuel to cover that particular margin. So if the market comes down and the market is no longer controllable, and then we have smuggling of goods through unofficial channels, because if I need dollars for me to go to, as a commercial bank, import something from perhaps another country, all that process is not feasible because the foreign exchange is not there. It is becoming too expensive. So then they look for other channels, what we used to call magendo, Kitambo, so through other border channels. So it brings the market down. Yes.
It brings the market down. As you, of course, rightly put it, Kenya is dependent on imports.
Yes.
Will it mean that at some point, hopefully we don't get there, but could we get to a point where there are no commodities? You have money, you go into a supermarket, but there are no commodities to purchase?
Yes, of course, because remember, we import a lot, and so much of the item that we consume locally are imported, perhaps including, we've seen conversation of rice, sugar. So this person who was importing rice, he or she is not able now to import because the currency, the USD is not there to do that particular international transaction. So this particular person who imports sugar brings it to Nairobi, it is packaged and sent to my local supermarket. So that particular process is not happening. The supply channel is now interfered with. So you go to that particular shop in the village and you don't find sugar, you don't find rice. So you have money but you cannot consume. And that's what we call hyperinflation. Those are the aspects, those are the premises of hyperinflation.
Last year, some manufacturers said that they could not access dollars,
yes,
to do their imports. Do you feel that we will hear this particular sentiment in the next few months?
So the sentiment that perhaps that we might expect and we might see that they might not say perhaps we are not able to access dollar. They'll say it has become too expensive for us to import items because the foreign exchange rate will go up, of course, so that you can be able to, the holders of this particular currency want to make the biggest margins, but no more profit out of this particular demand, given that the supply is getting low. So what we only expect is that foreign exchange going high, our currency losing value. So and that's the complaint that we will have, and that one will push importers out of the market. Yes. Let's
talk a bit further into the inflation issue. Currently around 9%. How does this look?
It's quite bad. I think we've had the high of 8.8, now 9 is becoming a new record that we are seeing. It is quite terrifying, quite scary. But when we look at the reality in terms of the highest items that make the inflation index, this is unga, for example, that we consume here in this particular country. It is 200 shillings, so it has become very expensive. So of course it contributes to that particular aspect of high inflation. Look at petroleum products; it has become very expensive. So and these are items that we consume heavily as a nation, and they make the biggest contribution of our inflation index. So of course it is quite risky that we might be facing a double-digit inflation that might be first in history, perhaps. Yes, but of course we think there are mechanisms that the government will try to see, because when the new government came into power, they say they're going to scale, they're going to the new project, they're not going to fund any extra high expenditure projects, so that they're able to cushion the inflation rates. But when we see an inflation of 9-point-something%, so we are of 9-point-something inflation points, meaning we are going to double. So the government needs to sit back and agree. Well, the subsidies, what we're holding this particular inflation, once we open the subsidy and say we're not going to subsidize anything, the inflation has gone very high. So are these subsidies helping? So that conversation needs to be had, and it should be discussed and see whether the inflation would bring things down, because we need to cushion the public in terms of consumption cost.
We will get to the taxation bit in just a little bit.
Yes.
I would like us to talk about the global scene. You've talked, of course, about the high fuel prices right now. OPEC was meeting, was it yesterday?
Yes.
And it was not likely that they would bring anything down.
Yes.
There is a precedented global recession. How is this going to impact Kenya?
Of course, as I said earlier, we are net importer, and basically what we consume most come from outside. And remember, the value of what we export is still low compared to what we bring here in this country. So that means when the entire global economy is shaking, of course, Kenya will have to shake because, of course, we rely on them. It is us who is facing that particular recession out there because our food comes from out there. Most of what we consume comes from out there where we have crisis. So basically, we get affected a lot. And then it's about the government now to reason out which priorities do we have. Do we have to cushion the public through subsidies? Do we have to stop doing some cost projects that are very costly? The other aspect is that once we have recession out there, and of course Kenya is affected because economically the world is one. So then there are those projects that the government will say, we will not do this particular project that to cushion the public. But remember, the government is the highest spender, is the highest supplier of money in this economy. So when they don't spend, of course, then the public will start crying. So it's a catch-22 situation, but of course there will be mechanisms that the government will come with to ensure that the recession is cushioned locally.
Clearly, the government has a lot of balancing to do, yeah? You want to net a lot of the maximum taxes you can so that you can make sure that the bills, you know, especially recurrent expenditure in this country is very high. The government proposed that the recurrent expenditure be cut by 300 billion annually.
Yes.
Is this achievable?
So far, because they say they'll be able to achieve that by January, and there are so many circulars that have flown across the public sector regarding some cost cutting, some projects being postponed. So of course they have been able to reduce that particular budget by 300 and something billion. But if they have other ways to spend that particular 300 billion, then it's okay. The only risk is we reduce by 300 billion. So this 300 billion was supposed to push the economy by how much? In terms of reducing the inflation. So if we don't do that, then the economy is not able to spend this particular 300 billion. Of course, now we expect some issues in the economy. So I'm sure they've been able to reduce to some extent, and we have seen those conversations in the public sector. And they are all talking about we will do. We've not seen them launch extensive, very big projects. So basically, let's say they're on a go slow in terms of the budget. Yes. The
manufacturing sector is a very key sector in ensuring that we are reducing our import bill.
Yes.
At the same time, they are complaining that there are all these taxes that are being proposed. There's the electricity, the cost of electricity that is set to go high if these proposed electricity tariffs are approved. How do you think the government is supporting value addition within the country?
On one side, the government needs money to spend and build these roads and create conducive environment for these particular investors. On the other side, the government should get money from these particular investors. So they need to tax these people perhaps to do the investment that they want to do. And of course, sometimes it chases these particular investors away. So basically, what is trying to happen is this. For those particular investors locally, there need to be discussion in terms of taxation for those particular investors that are around, that we have a particular discussion. These particular suppliers, or rather manufacturers who are in this country, they have been here for some time. Can we agree we will reduce some tax, or we give you tax holiday for some specific taxes for this number of years? If you produce a certain number of products that perhaps have direct effect or direct impact to the public in terms of cost of living, which type of tax do we need to discuss? So there needs to be that particular conversation.
Right. In studio, I am speaking with David Kingo, who is an economist. David, she has, of course, talked to the senators. They've talked about the allocation for the counties. That has been a point of contention since devolution started in this country. Do you think the government or the various arms of government are working, you know, in tandem when it comes to just ensuring that counties are well funded?
I think all this conversation, there's something called canons of budgeting, or canons of economic expenditure. Well, one is the cost of running an economy, apart from we do a project, or the cost of that particular project, apart from the benefit that's going to the people. So in this concept, I think we want more money to oversight, which will be even higher than the money that we do for development. So the cost of oversight might be higher than the cost of doing this particular development. Because every elected member of assembly or parliament, they want a kitty to supervise. So I think it's a conversation that really people need to get over about the much we want to be able to supervise. Then in terms of allocation of fund to the county government, of course we are not yet there, because some departments need to be devolved and they're yet to be devolved because the funding is not yet there. So what is going to the county, if you less the corruption that happens, and then you also see with pending bills, recurrent costs, whatever goes to development is very, very small. So we go again to the concept of how much money is being used for us to run a development. So we get 14 billion, for example, only 2 billion is for the economy. 12 billion is for running that 2 billion. So I think it's a concept that the government needs to look at. Yes.
Of course, we shall be following how that goes. Yeah, let's get back to our conversation on the state of the economy. And before we joined June, you were talking about the taxation. Please go ahead.
So we were saying about those manufacturing companies or investors in this country. The government needs to get money to run the economy, and they have to get them from these particular manufacturers. The same manufacturer also are feeling the cost of doing business here in Kenya, because petroleum or the petroleum products cost has gone very high. That's cost of fuel. The other cost is cost of electricity, that has also gone very high. So most manufacturers will switch to solar power, which the durability or return on investment for that particular solar investment sometimes is questionable in terms of number of years that you rely on that particular investment. So all that increases the cost of production in this country. And what happens in the long run? These manufacturers will go away, or they'll stay away from this particular economy. So there is need for a discussion between the government and Kenya Association of Manufacturers that which tax holidays can we get if we produce a certain number of goods. If we do environmental conservancy, can we have a tax holiday? Can we have exemption on some aspects? So that way we're able to encourage these manufacturers to be around and for them to produce more, to be able to tax in terms of, if we produce more, of course with more you need to tax. But when you tax on the investment arm of those particular manufacturing entities, of course the cost of production becomes very high and they tend to share away. So there is need for a discussion in terms of the tax structure for the manufacturers, because we want to say by Vision 2030 we need to be a manufacturing country. But the kind of taxes that we are running on these manufacturers, they are going away. I'm sure we have taken time before we hear a new mega manufacturer in this country. So what's all about that? It's all about cost of investing in this country. We had a discussion that went viral on social media. When Tanzanian president was around, someone talks about how they would come and invest a lot of the other Simon on the same, but they have never come. I think that conversation ended there. So there is need to be a discussion regarding the kind of tax that we tax our manufacturers. Yes.
As we are making the business environment conducive for the local manufacturers, we're also looking to attract investors from other countries to invest here and manufacture here. But when you look at the taxes, the high electricity costs, and making our products highly uncompetitive in the region, isn't the government working against its promise?
Of course, I want to mention something. Initially, we were told that for you to go and withdraw money from your bank, you need to give a 1 week notice that I'll come for my money this particular time. Then some institutions came, and now you can get your money on phone and all over. So the same concept perhaps will go to electricity supply. How many people in this country deserve to be paying for electricity, but they don't pay because they have not been connected to that power? It is a privilege to have power in this country.
Unfortunately.
It should be with everybody. So the number of people who have reached age of consuming power and they are not able to consume because they have not been connected are the ones that now where the government is saying we are not able to reap as much as the electricity company to be able to run our operations because we have a large number of consumers that we have not connected. What if someone else comes and says, now let us open this market for electricity? We have another supply of electricity and make sure all those people that are not connected, they are connected. So what will happen to the cost of power? It comes down, of course. So that concept is what we need to look at. Even if when you go to the concept of taxation, I was thinking, how many number of people do business in this country, but they don't pay tax because they are not connected to the tax payment system or the tax payment structure. So if we are able to connect everybody to be able to pay tax, the ease, another canon of taxation, ease of paying tax should be very easy to administer tax and to pay tax. So if we have this another population connected to the taxation system, of course then that will reduce the cost of tax in this country, or rather the government will get enough from these particular people. So then we'll say, let us now reduce the tax percentage that we are running on this economy, because now we have more people into the tax bracket. So the thing is this: can we have more people to the tax bracket? Can we have more business to the tax bracket? That way we'll be able to reduce these particular taxes. Can we have many people connected to power? That will be able to reduce this particular power cost, and that way we'll bring now investor, because if the power has come down in this country, then we have more people coming to this country and invest. They create employment. That person who did not have a structure for him or her to have connection to electricity will get a job from this particular manufacturer and go and buy a plot. That plot will be connected to power. So this particular cycle, when we close one side, the entire cycle closes. So we need that particular discussion. How many people are not connected to tax system? How many people are not connected to power? Those are the people that should help the government reduce electricity when they come to that particular bracket. They should reduce the tax that we get when they go into that particular bracket.
I think, Kingo, one of the questions that Kenyans have been asking, both online and offline, is the purchase of electricity. I mean, when you look at your tokens and how they are listed, what you have purchased, it does not make sense. Yeah, you'll find maybe for 1,000 shillings, you've bought only 38 units. The rest of the money is allocated to, you know, some charges. Could you help it make sense for Kenyans?
Of course, there are taxes on that particular tariff for electricity, and there are quite a number of them, because the cost of supplying power, of course, it is expensive. And then there is the question, can we do away without these particular tariffs on electricity? Can we work without those particular tariffs? So we have the EPRA aspect on Kenya Power. I think they say they need to be included in terms of discussion or pricing that particular power. Remember, the electricity supplying company is the one that knows the cost of putting that power on someone's bulb. And then someone else independent now comes and say, no, this should be the price of that particular power. So that particular discussion creates friction. Who knows the cost of power? Because you determine the price from the cost. So the supplier knows, yes, this is the cost of placing this power on this someone's bar. But then someone else, no, we have a formula for giving pricing this particular. And that person comes with a formula, that formula comes with a cost on that particular token. So do we have, the president said, I think we have some unnecessary institution that we need to discuss whether to bring them down, consolidate them, and reduce this particular cost of running business for the government in this country. So some costs are legit, but then there is a question of, are they necessary? That we have all these particular costs on someone who is buying electricity. Because I think the cost of power has gone very, very high. As a person, I have noticed that. Yes.
And, well, if the proposed hikes are anything to go by, it's about to go higher. I mean, for most people, they'll be paying about 21 shillings per unit. Yes. Currently, it's at 10 shillings. Yes. That is over double. Yes. And with the current cost of living that Kenyans are dealing with, this will probably just, you know, mess up their budgets. Some people will not be able to afford food. More people. There are people who are already not affording food, so more people will not be able to afford the basic commodities.
Of course, all these costs will be pushed to the consumers, because once we increase the cost of electricity, that electricity cost is put on the item that we produce in this particular country. So if it is packaging sugar, for example, it is packaged by machine that are run perhaps on electricity. So what will the manufacturer? The manufacturer, whoever is packaging this sugar, will put that particular cost on that particular product. So it goes to the local consumer at a higher cost. So when we say we are increasing electricity from 10 to 21 shillings, we are literally saying we will increase cost of unga by 10 shillings.
Yes. Well, that conversation continues in just a little bit, just supporting what Dr. Ahmed Okwel has just said about manufacturing, supporting manufacturing, ensuring that we are producing locally for local solutions. Yes.
Yes, of course. And remember, as I said earlier, that Vision 20 that talk about being a manufacturing country. So supporting what we produce and what we consume locally helps a lot. And even when you connect the cost of healthcare for this particular cancer patients, a very expensive process that they undergone, very painful. So if we're able to produce in this country, we ensure that we consume at cheaper cost. Then we have more disposable income, perhaps to take care of healthcare, or for people to take insurance. And as I said, even in that particular conversation, let me chip in something that also hails the economy from the individual perspective and cost of healthcare. Remember, we have NHIF, that people perhaps don't understand the concept of NHIF and why we should contribute. Because we will talk about economic growth in this particular country and how much money needs to be channeled to healthcare. But you realize the government is putting a lot of money to support healthcare just because majority of people who are accessing healthcare are not on NHIF. So if people are on NHIF majority, then the government will spend less on supporting healthcare because it will be paid through that particular scheme. And that money that's going perhaps to healthcare will be channeled to something else that will support the economy in another sector. So it's a whole circle that healthcare is very critical and affect the economy and needs to be discussed and connect with any other aspect of the economy. Yes.
Yes, let's now go back to what you were saying about manufacturers having to pass the cost of hiked tariffs, be it electricity as well as taxes. Just go ahead on that.
Yes, we're saying about the cost of electricity. So when we say it will move up by 10 shillings, we are saying the cost of unga will go up by a certain shillings, because if I'm a manufacturer and I want to perhaps, we call them flour mills, so the cost of electricity has gone high. It will reduce my profit. You don't expect for me to bear that particular cost and not push to the consumer. So the cost of this particular product will go high. The other cost that perhaps also need to be included is the cost of fuel. If the cost of electricity has gone up, unga's cost has gone high. The cost of fuel, because this unga will be transported by trucks. These trucks consume petrol, which is becoming very expensive. So the cost of living and the cost of goods and commodity in the economy, of course, goes high, and it affects. Because when they go high, the demand for these products come down. Because that's what will happen. If we've been consuming 1 kilo, that's gone for around, or rather 2 kgs per kg, that's 200 bob. It has gone to 300. So we'll be able to constrain ourselves as a family and say, let us get other items that perhaps we can get from the shamba, that we can get at a cheaper cost. So if this particular someone who has a flour mill was selling 10 packages per day, then they reduce perhaps to 5. So when they reduce to 5, so they also increases cost, because he has to make a profit with the 5% that he is going out with. Now given earlier he was doing 10 packets. So the entire concept increases cost of living. So increasing these key items cost, electricity and fuel, will have a very high effect on the economy. And of course, we've seen we go to inflation of 9 point something.
So Kenyans should brace for tougher times?
Of course, it's not going to be simple as long as the inflation is at 9 point something. Of course, at the highest we've ever experienced, and you don't expect a miracle that it comes to 3 point something points now. Of course, either it increases or it stays at a particular point, but we're going to have quite a tight period for the next, around 3 years.
Around 3 years. Well, the government is optimistic that eventually it will stabilize the economy and bring the cost of basic commodities down. Well, of course, this is BizCheck that you are watching here on KBC Channel 1. Remember, you can interact with us on Twitter. We are at KBC Channel 1. My personal Twitter handle is at Betty Kiptum. BizCheck continues in just a little bit. We want to take a quick break. When we come back, we will be talking about the agriculture bit of it. The government wants to increase production in that particular sector in its efforts to bring down the cost of basic commodities. What does that look like, and are the current interventions working? All that is coming up in just a little bit. Stay with us. Many thanks for keeping it BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum. In studio, we are having a conversation about the state of the economy. Now, we want to talk about matters agriculture, the government's focus to increase production in the agriculture sector, of course, rolling out the fertilizer subsidy. The second phase will be coming up in a few months. What does that look like, and is it working so far? David Kingo, thank you for staying with me. Could you just tell us what your thoughts are on the fertilizer subsidy?
I think this fertilizer subsidy was a good kick for the new regime when they come to power, because we have to agree Kenya is an agricultural country. The only unfortunate challenge that we're having is rains are not coming as expected. So we've done fertilizer, but the rains have changed most of the farmers. So the government needs also to focus on agriculture that's geared towards irrigation schemes, having back what used to on like Moya irrigation scheme.
Okay.
And those particular.
There's a bit of a sound challenge, Kingo, that will be sorted out in a bit. But of course, here in studio, we are talking about the state of the economy. Remember that there is currently, as we speak, the country has a 3.92 months of import cover, which is below the 4 months recommended. And of course, as Kingo said a little bit earlier, is that will impact the kind of imports that we can get, or the amount of imports. The cost of importing will be a bit expensive, considering that a lot of manufacturers import some of their raw materials, and we also import finished goods, most of them being from products that we actually export, especially from the agriculture sector. We export a lot of raw materials and import finished goods, and part of the strategies was ensuring that production in the country is increased to just stabilize the cost of food. Kingo, as you were saying?
Yes, I'll talk about the fertilizer issue was a good start by the new regime, even though the conversation has gone down. I don't know why, but Kenya is an agricultural country. The only challenge that we're having is that we should climate change, and rain is already rain-fed agriculture is already short-changing farmers. So the government needs to focus on irrigation schemes and agriculture that is not fed on rainwater, water harvesting, dams, so that we're able to cushion the fertilizer that we are giving farmers. Because there's no need that we give someone fertilizer, that the rains don't come and we end up not producing anything. So the issue of water in terms of dams and irrigation schemes will help and will support the agriculture concept in this country, and as long as the cost of fertilizer is kept on being subsidized. Yes.
So it's beyond just subsidizing fertilizer.
Yes, of course, agriculture is beyond that. Agriculture is just a small aspect of farming, because preparing the land, pesticide, and remember the kind of pesticide that farmers are facing nowadays, or other pests that the farmers are facing nowadays. I think they are more than used to be traditionally.
Yeah, they're different, they're stronger.
They're stronger, they are resistant. So all that is cost of producing in agriculture. But the key thing the government needs to focus, even more than fertilizer, is water, because climate change has really affected, and we can have fertilizer, we can have the cheapest pesticide in this country, but as long as we don't have water, so we cannot do anything with agriculture. Yes.
I like that you mentioned the issue of the climate change that is, of course, impacting Africa the most in the world, Kenya being one of them. Yes. The impacts are being felt. The drought that is ongoing right now, many have lost livestock and their crops. Many farmers have really lost that. And yesterday there was a story about climate adaptation and the way Africa needs around $53 billion annually just for climate adaptation. Of that, only 53% of, well, 11 billion is what is currently in the continent. And governments are only giving a very minimal percentage of that. So when we look at resilience for the farmers, we want them to produce more, but we also have to enhance their resilience. What does the government need to do?
Of course, the agreements in terms of from the budget across Africa, how much should be allocated to agriculture and climate issues. But the money is not there, it's not sufficient to support that, because it will be asked whether we give people food or we support climate change. But the concept of planting trees might be a game changer, really well appreciated in Africa. It might have some positive impact on the climate change. So we continue to struggle as Africa. And what has affected most of these countries because Africa, we are an agricultural country. We don't produce as much finished good locally, so we rely on importation. So on that particular support of agriculture, you relied on rain, as I said earlier, because even irrigation schemes have come down, because irrigation schemes, perhaps it was community farming. Nowadays, there are those particular individual farming, which really everybody has to sort their own water. So that particular aspect has really affected agricultural production in Africa, not even in Kenya alone. And that's why we have the discussion of climate change. But the challenge is we cannot meet the minimum threshold as a country to be allocated to climate change. Yes.
And so is there hope? Because as you said, we are giving fertilizer subsidies, but we are giving them to farmers who probably their crop will go to waste because of this drought and all that.
Of course, climate change is a global issue. So when we have global discussions where funding can come from outside Africa, perhaps, in terms of grants to address climate change, because when we don't produce as Africa food, then the world we cannot feed, because Africa feeds the world in terms of agricultural product. So if we don't produce as Africa, of course the rest of the world cannot consume. So whatever small we produce locally, we send very expensive. So, but when they support Africa in terms of climate change, we're able to produce more and sell at a cheaper price out there. So of course, at the global discussion, and we expect the international community to come in and support Africa because they need us in terms of food production.
Yes. Of course, the world needs Africa in terms of food production. But of course, Africa has been very intentional in the past few years to ensure that there is value addition in this sector, because save for the raw material that we are exporting, what we are importing, as you said, is way more expensive. So what should Africa do to make sure that it is building its value addition bit?
I think the biggest challenge is that agriculture concept we produce as a person. For me, I'll plant onions, and my next neighbor immediately will do tomatoes. The other one will do maize. So for me, with my only 1 acre of tomatoes, I cannot influence the market as much. But if the concept of aggregators is brought to the market on agriculture, whereby we are able to put farmers of onions together, they know each other, they discuss, they understand the challenges, so they're able to produce in bulk. So these particular aggregators from county level, perhaps we have aggregators of onion farming in Machakos County, aggregators of onion farming in Nakuru County. So they are brought together at some point. So we agree, we are planting this particular type of onion, we are selling to this market. So the government is able to have a conversation with the consumers out there. We have sent this number of farmers to produce this particular product. We've given them this seedling and we expect this particular output. Do you have a market for that? Then of course we get a market. So the concept of aggregators can really help value addition in this particular sector, because when we have the aggregators across the county government, they set a committee. That committee sits together and saying, we are farmers of onions in Kenya. We have one farmer in this area, another one in a certain area. We need the government to come together and tell us, can we have a food processing company for the particular product that we are producing? We as farmers, we want to be the owners. So we are giving this particular amount of contribution to that particular kitty of building that particular industry. So then the government will say, okay, for us as government, then we come in because of quality and other issues. We are going to give you this much. So that particular concept is about to bring around industries to ensure our food is processed and exported with a higher value. So, but as long as I'm growing onion on my own, I don't understand who to sell out there. So of course it will not be able to get as much value as it could get if the aggregators were there.
Of course, very important pointers, and one of the key issues that is affecting that sector is matters of financing. But here in studio, I'm with David Kingo, and we are talking about the state of the economy, and coincidentally we were talking about matters agriculture in terms of value addition to ensure that the production is increased in the country. Please go ahead.
Yes, and the concept of aggregate that we talked before is that as a single farmer, I not be able to convince the European Union that that I have onion that are perhaps and I can sell to you, but when 12 people coming together and forming aggregators, they're able to face market. So we need a structure and refocus about agriculture marketing in this country. We cannot have someone who says we market for Kenya and that person does not understand even at what time we are growing maize, even at what time we are growing beans. So we need to connect. We need the farmers to do their own thing, both locally and international. We need to connect the farmers with the market. Let the farmer deal with the consumer. Have a framework whereby the farmer is dealing with the consumer. It's the same like football. If you have a footballer running the football affairs, of course they run one. So if you have a farmer running the farming affairs, of course they are able to understand. But the issue of reaching farmers individually, we'll have challenges. So we need to bring these farmers together. When you have that conversation together, of course, they're able to market out there in a better way.
Of course, convergence is a very important thing.
Yes.
We want to get back to Junaid Karisa. She is at the Pride Inn Hotel in Mombasa now. Well, she shall be giving us an update on the National Assembly closing. That is Junaid Karisa. She shall be joining us in a little bit. I'm told that she's getting ready. But Kingo, as you were saying, that farmers need to come together to access markets much more easily. And currently that is happening within cooperatives, of course. More needs to be done, right?
Yes, more needs to be done because even the concept of cooperatives, what you need to understand about aggregators in agriculture is this, that a cooperative will come and put farmers of different products together. So they are not able to speak from the same perspective.
Okay.
But aggregators will put farmers of maize together, farmers of beans together, farmers of wheat together. So they are able to face the market. And the objectives of cooperatives, they are not maybe perhaps the same as objectives of those aggregators, because those aggregators are farmers. They need to put money in their pocket when they sell out there, so they are eager to do that. So the drive is basically different. So cooperatives sometimes will have an aspect of financing, controlled operations, but not exactly money-wise in terms of farmers. So that concept might bring change. And traditionally, we used to have a product that was called French beans in this country that was really supported by aggregators. And when they would come companies and say that we have a company that perhaps produces French beans heavily in this country, and then they would have an outgrowers section. So in growers, this particular exporter of this product, exporting, planting for their own, in their own farms, leasing farms to produce French beans as a company themselves.
Okay.
That's company A. Then they'll have another section called outgrowers. Outgrowers is now they identify specific farmers and they make them, as I put them together, give them delivery books. So that particular people now are able to deliver to this particular marketer and able to sell out there. So if that particular marketer goes out there and tells, for us, the minimum that you can give us is 50 tons. Then say, I will get 20 tons from what we produce as a company, then the rest push to farmers that are aggregators. That concept. And Mishiri have gone into hiding, or they have gone down the production of French beans. They are no longer being planted as they used to be, because that concept has come down.
Let's hope that's a concept that can be adopted in the short term.
Yes, so I talk about our Kenya and Africa, the agricultural countries, and perhaps I've not seen agriculture is still devolved unit. A lot of effort comes from the county government. That we have CEC in agriculture and chief officers in agriculture, but you also need to see even agriculture in CDF being told now CDF and rather NGCDF you can still fund agricultural projects. We can build more of dams, we can have more allocations to dams to supply water, so that we have a conversation that perhaps supports agriculture. The same way we've been able to marshal education in this country, both county and national government. If we have a focus on agriculture on the same aspect, we'll be able to reduce the cost of living in this country by way far. Because all these things that we're talking about, if we have food on our table at a cheaper cost, if we're able to sell as much agricultural products out there. Remember when you go to countries like Qatar or other Dubai, you see sukuma in their own shelves written, this is from Kenya, onion, this is from Kenya. So if we're able to push our production from all aspects, then we'll be able to cushion this economy that we keep on complaining that's coming down. It does not need miracles to do that. So agriculture is a game changer for Africa, and it has worked well in Tunisia. You We've seen their economy growing. Most of the West African countries that are trying to push their economic growth to better levels, it is basically through support on agriculture, where they have localized support for farming. We also had the conversation of MSMEs. So MSMEs are not shop owners that we see on the highways in this country. MSMEs are also agricultural people who are doing farming. So when we talk about access to credit, perhaps for a farmer, it is going to be difficult compared to access to credit for someone who perhaps is even selling phones in this town. So the first person who should have ease to credit is the farmer, because that's the one who is cushioning this economy, is the one who is carrying this economy. So we did that particular conversation to support agriculture, and the way we've marshaled education, we should marshal agriculture the same way.
Kingo, we have been having these conversations for the longest time.
Yes.
I mean, the issues about access to credit for farmers, it has been a conversation that has been happening for a long time, and clearly some steps have been taken towards achieving that. Do you think enough is happening?
Enough is not happening, and this is what I'll say. The farmer who wants to get money, even from a bank, has gotten for subsidized fertilizer. They have planted the first month of the rain, which is very okay. He has gone here, taken a loan of, let's say, 100,000. Then all of a sudden the rain stops. So the bank has lost. The security was the produce that was to come from that particular farm. It is not coming. So if they had charged another security, perhaps the parcel of land, the title deed or a cow for that particular farmer, that cow is sold by the auctioneers to pay that particular bank. So at the end of, because of borrowing a loan to finance agriculture, you have lost your cows and you have lost your land, perhaps. So all that aspect is what brings challenge. So if the farmer is well supported to guarantee of producing what he or she has planted, then credit can come in. Otherwise, we'll keep on talking about funding SMCs, but the SMCs that we are funding, they are not agricultural SMCs. So the government needs to understand what is funding agriculture until the output is there. Someone will fund a cow that is producing milk, because of course the milk is there and they can see, compared to someone who is funding agriculture or planting maize, because there is uncertainty whether we'll produce. So we need to put in water to these farmers to give guarantee that we are going to harvest. So when we have a guarantee that we are going to harvest, now the person who is called the financier, the banker, will come in and say, okay, now I can fund you. So if that concept is not enough, we need a credit guarantee scheme by the government that fund agricultural people in this particular area. The people in a certain area, they have a high probability of producing. So give those more loans, give more loans to those people. The people in this particular area, bring research companies. The only food that you can produce here is cassava. So if we have a farmer who is asking for a loan to plant cassava in this area, give him or her loan. So it is a combination of very many stakeholders to ensure that a farmer is able to be funded. But of course, the credit sector will not go to fund any farmer blindly, because we know rains are short-changing.
Right.
Yes.
I like that you've brought in the issue of climate-resistant foods.
Yes.
There is the issue of diversification, both from a production perspective and a consumption perspective.
Yes.
When you talk to many farmers, I mean, they are planting what most farmers plant.
Yes.
Maize, rice in some areas, you know, depending on the region. So what will it take for diversification to be increased in this country?
So as I said earlier, agriculture is a very wide discipline in terms of what we do. Number one is education in terms of the production patterns, or rather the planting patterns. So I plant maize today, I should plant beans next time. That knowledge is no longer with the farmers. Then the other issue is access to these particular seedlings that they need to plant. So by the time they're in a real situation, so it is on a Monday, we are expected rains, and by Friday the rain are coming. So we need to we need to go and look for what we plant. Then I have a neighbor who has reserved 1 bag of maize. So he tells me, I can give you 10 kilos to start with. So by default I'll plant maize. But if I had money, I could have gone and bought something else. Then the government should now come in and educate farmers. So we are in January, or rather we're in February. So we need to start sending notices to primary schools for farmers to be notified. Go and tell your parents to buy this particular type of seedling and reserve. The rain will come in a month, so that it does not come to surprise to most of the farmers. Then the other concept is research. Soil research is of late being happening. So can we have government send extension officers to come to your land and tell you, for you to be able to produce, you need to use this type of manure, you need to plant this type of crop. And when you have that particular knowledge extended to farmers, then we're able to have a guaranteed output. Yes.
For farmers who are currently struggling with drought and famine in some areas, is agriculture insurance the way to go?
Agriculture insurance, rather, in agriculture, I think in around 2013, 2014, that concept was really being pushed, and many products were being developed by insurance companies. But the challenge came in terms of guarantee that these products that we're insuring, they are safe to an extent, the risk will not crystallize. That's how we say. But I'm guaranteeing the rains will not make it. So what do? I go and take insurance. And then, of course, the rain will not happen. So I'm not able to produce, and the insurance will be able to compensate me. So the guarantee of production, the guarantee of an output in agricultural sector is what has challenged insurance company. And we go back to the original concept. If water is supplied by the government through dams, then the insurance companies have confidence that the means that we're planting here, it is going to be produced, because water is there. Everything that is needed support by the government is being given. We've subsidized cost of production in agriculture. So the insurance companies will come in. But it's quite risky for now, agriculture, to keep on pushing those products. Yes.
So as you see it, the government came in, very robust initiatives, fertilizer subsidies, focused on reducing the cost of living. Clearly that is not happening in the short term. Do you think that within this 5-year term, the government will achieve its objectives on that front?
Of course they ought to achieve, because where we stand as a country, we have only one option to achieve. So if the inflation was around 5%, then we would buy time and say, let us see how it goes. But at 9.9%, so if we don't do anything, we fall to double inflation. So the government has to put a lot of effort, and we've not seen an output with the current government. They are still doing meetings and frameworks. I'm sure you've seen several of them. So when they are done with the framework setups, then we see what they're going to roll out to the economy. Then perhaps we can have a guarantee whether they'll make it or they won't make it. Yes.
But in the next 3 years, how is it looking for the Kenyan?
So it is going to be tough, because the government does not do miracles to get it. The revenue has to be found from pockets, and the president also was very clear on that we have to pay taxes. Of course, it is to run the government. It's run through taxing the public, or rather taxing the economy. So it's going to be a tough year, because rain has not come as we expected. That is one. So drought is here for another, let's say, a year plus. So taxation is very high. The cost of fuel is very high. International economy is also struggling. So basically, we're going to have tough 2 years. Let's have hope in the third year, perhaps rain will have come and we'll be in a better position.
We hope for better days.
Yes.
Right. So as we come to a close of this conversation, of course, we've talked a lot about the state of the economy, various sectors. What is your outlook? So
my outlook is that the government is still very, has a lot of energy, in terms of what they want to do. Can it be done? And when it is done, basically, we'll have a better position as an economy. Because what will happen is that once Kenyans continue struggling, the civic consciousness will come down. And civic consciousness, it is the urge by every Kenyan to keep on producing as a producer in this particular economy. So my view is that the government need to keep on protecting the civic consciousness of the public for them to keep on producing.
Right.
Yes.
Well, so this has been BizCheck. Thank you very much, David, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thanks a lot.
Right. David Kingo is an economist, and we have been talking about the state of the economy, of course, focusing on a number of areas that the government is focusing on, including the agriculture sector and the things that are ailing the economy in terms of fuel prices, high taxation, as well as electricity prices. And the hope of all Kenyans is that the cost of living comes down. As Kingo has just said, it might take a number of years, but eventually we hope that things get better. This has been BizCheck. We want to hand it over to Victor. Well, the Cancer Summit is happening at Safari Park Hotel, and of course, that particular summit is taking stock of the cancer situation in the country, cancer awareness, the status of treatment and management, as well as, of course, the high cost of managing cancer in the country. Victor Olo will be getting together with us in a little bit, but this has been BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing. Bye-bye.